Hi everyone, I'm Kieran from Dad Matters and I'm the operations manager. I live in Bolton, I've got kids and I am a dad, which makes peer support much easier for me. We're here today to talk about baby communication and how it affects or impacts on dads and relationships. And we've got a couple of Dad Matters coordinators and we've got the wonderful Inga from the Brazelton Centre. Do you want to just introduce yourselves? Inga, you can go first.
Yes, I can do that. Yeah, my name is Inge Nickel and I'm the director at the Brazelton Centre UK. And it's absolutely wonderful to speak to you guys here today, especially as it's Father's Day. So I look forward to hearing about the work that you do.
Brill, Dan, you go next.
Yeah, I'm Dan. I'm a Dad Matters coordinator for Bolton and Greater Manchester. I've got my own little ones. Yeah, and it's like Kieran said, it's a massive help in offering peer support.
Lee?
And I'm Lee. I'm the Dad Matters coordinator for Gloucestershire. I'm a dad of two boys, 9 and 8. And yeah, I think back to my early experiences of parenthood and that element of baby communication. I think it's so vital that, you know, the information that we can give to dads and the help we can give in those early stages of relationship and support and attachment and bonding. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Brill, thank you very much. So I thought, first of all, I would fill you in, Inga, with a little bit of what Dad Matters does and where we came from. And then we can have a bit more of a chat about how the work of the Brazelton Centre has informed what we're doing, if that's okay. So Dad Matters is a Home Start project. We're based at Home Start Host, which is Oldham, Stockport, Tameside and Bolton. And we also have Dad Matters coordinators now in Gloucestershire across 3 of their Home Start schemes and Warrington and Salford. We were born from a PIMS project, which is Parent Infant Mental Health, for those who don't know, where we offer peer support for families, and those volunteers that offer that peer support through Home Start get extra training from our Parent Infant Mental Health services or early attachment services. They realised that they weren't engaging dads and that dads weren't accessing information, education, support around those early relationships. So the initial project started off as a partnership with the Early Attachment Service and the Anna Freud Centre to develop a way of helping dads to understand those early relationships with babies and what dad's role was in that and how they could support their baby's development. And it turned into Dad Matters, which encompasses all of that, but also has more of a universal element, a little bit more of a group peer support element, and we also do one-to-one support. Our main aim is to support attachment and bonding. We really want dads to understand how babies communicate, how babies' brains develop through interaction and responsive parenting. But we also want dads to understand what they get from that relationship too, and the kind of physical changes, the emotional changes that dads go through. We also want to support them with mental health, whether that's supporting mum with perinatal mental health issues or whether it's dad in their own right, and how that impacts on their relationships, both with baby and with partners and with services around the family. And then finally, we want to help dads to access services more readily. So they often don't know which services they can access. They don't know whether it's for them or whether it's only for mum. They sometimes wait, particularly until they're in crisis, before they access mental health support. So we want them to understand that there are lots and lots of different avenues for support. So that's what we do, and we do that through one-to-one referrals, through groups, through targeted work, through social media, through our website, through signposting, through education, and through a volunteer program where our volunteers help us to engage with more dads, as many as possible and as early as possible. So that's us in a nutshell. I think what we also wanted to talk about was how the Brazelton and the EMBO particularly really helps us with the work that we do. I went on the EMBO training because it was recommended from Dr. Pauline Lee, who's our lead clinician for parent infant mental health in Greater Manchester. And I went on the EMBO and it was with you, Inga, as well, and Maureen. And Maureen was a big part of Dad Matters being set up initially. And I honestly found it so fascinating. When I booked onto it, I thought it was another one of those courses that I would just put in my little toolkit and it would be there with all the other stuff. But actually, it informed everything about the language that we used and the tools that we had. And actually, a lot of what we talk about really resonates with dads. so the embo for me is probably one of the things I use the most. I know that Lee hasn't been on the embo, but Dan has been on the embo. I'd like to ask Dan how he feels about what he got from it. My daughter's phoning me while I'm doing this, so I'm going to answer that while Dan tells you about his experiences with the embo.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. A bit like Kieran, really. I suppose I was a bit didn't know what to expect prior to going on the course. It was really enlightening as a parent. So I've got 3 children. I've got a stepson who's 10, and I've got girls who are 3 and 4. And I just kind of, it was one of those things that I wish I'd done or had the knowledge of what he taught me 5 years ago. Because it would have changed it wouldn't change our relationship with my children, because we have a really great relationship. It would have helped me to manage how I feel, especially because having 2 children quite close together, it was quite demanding. So it would have helped me to understand more about them, to enable me to be, I suppose, be a better dad, really. And I suppose keep a more, so obviously it's one of the best experiences that I've ever had, having children. It's also brought like stresses and anxieties with it. And it would have, overall, I feel as though it would have made it a happier experience. And I think speaking to dads about it, one of the key things I think with dads is that I think sometimes when you mention attachment and bonding, even though like you can be on the phone and you almost feel their eyes glaze over a bit because they might not know what we're talking about. But when you talk about practical things like shaking the rattle near baby and things like that, or like when baby like follows dad around the room due to sound or whatever it may be, that's when I've found that dads tend to then become interested when it's those practical things about the baby. That's when you can see dads just kind of go, all right, okay, start asking a few more questions, and it's really, really interesting. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
You on mute, Karen?
I wanted to talk, but I left it on mute, so nobody heard me. It was amazing as well. I'll have to try and replicate how good it was. Yeah, when I went on the training, Dan, it reminded me of a dad that we spoke to really early doors in the project, and we were doing some interviewing for the videos that we have on YouTube, and we interviewed this dad who had twins, and they were about 4 weeks old. And dad was upstairs, and I was sat talking to the mum, and the twins were in little bouncy chairs in front of me, and I was chatting away to them, and the babies were really interacting with me. And then dad came down, and he was stood behind them, and he said hello, and then popped into the kitchen. And as he said hello, both babies looked over to where he'd said it, where the noise had come from. And then when he came back in the room and he was talking while he was walking to the settee, they followed him all the way around the room. And then during the interview, he said that he wasn't sure that they really knew who he was yet, and that they weren't really engaging with him more, and that his relationship really hadn't started. And although he felt that they were a bit brighter, that it hadn't quite happened yet. And when I explained that I'd seen them follow him across the room, he was really, really interested in it. And every time he walked around the room, then he was watching them to see if they were following him. And it became a really big thing for that dad to understand that they did know who he was. They recognized his voice. They wanted to know where he was and wanted to interact with him. And when I went on the EMBO, it kind of consolidated all of that for me, I think. And it really helped me to understand that those practical things really are engaging for dads. I know, Lee, now, because you've not done the EMBO, but a lot of the language that we use and the shadowing that you've done on the courses that we do, we use that EMBO language quite often. How do you feel that you've kind of engaged with it? What have you got from it?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're aware, my background before coming to join Dad Matters was in residential social care. So I managed residential children's homes for nearly 23 years. So I saw the ambivalent, disorganized attachment histories of many of these children. Some of them had gone through abuse and trauma, but many of them had suffered from those lack of early interventions. And we can track them all the way back to those critical early years. So I'd come with a degree of knowledge and experience, but I was doing that before I became a dad. So I first became a dad in 2011. So I'd kind of gone with this element of, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to engage. This is how I'm going to stimulate and nurture my child. So whilst my eldest Thomas was in his mother's womb, I would sing to him. I would kind of talk to him, and I would feel and see the physical response of him moving around in his mother's tummy. And when he was born, which is where I bring it back to the embo, he was a 41 hour labour. So he went in at Thursday morning for an induction, arrived at 1:21 on Saturday morning. And like most babies do, crying, and I began singing the song that I used to sing, which was the theme tune to In the Night Garden. And he stopped, and he went to turn towards me, and the midwife said, and I'll always remember it, he knows your voice, he knows who you are. And I was very pleased, but gobsmacked in equal measure. So for me, even though I didn't know about ENBO, I'd identified that these things are critical. And at that one moment, it showed actually you can establish that relationship with your child. You can establish that rapport. We know that these things are done in utero as well. So ever since then, and obviously with the language that Kieran has mentioned, that we make it, and I make it in terms of the dads that I'm supporting, which is you can establish that relationship early. Just because your baby's not physically there with you in your arms, you can still be having that relationship. And then we obviously develop it in terms of them being able to interpret what their child is doing. And as Dan said, I wish I'd known then. You know, I think I did a reasonable job, but I think I could have been so much more enhanced in terms of my knowledge and understanding with that little bit of information and insight.
It's fab hearing that you've recognised all of that without actually doing the training. We need to get you on the training next. That's the next plan. As we get more coordinators across the country, we'll be highlighting that for all of them. So Inga, what do you think about dads and ENBO? Obviously, you are very experienced. And how do dads react when you do ENBOs with them? We've struggled to do the face-to-face ones since we've done the training, and it's something we definitely will be doing, but we're still not really seeing face-to-face. So when you do an ENBO with a couple or with dad, how does it go?
Well, yes, I've been lucky enough to do it for many, many years, using the ENBO and the NBAS before that. And I used it as a health visitor. That's my background. And I have to say, it is really, really important to, first of all, invite fathers to participate, because obviously as a health visitor, often we would be sort of coming to the home, and fathers would often have gone back to work. So sadly, a lot of the kind of work that we did was more with the mothers. And I always felt that was a bit sad, because it leaves a lot of responsibility on them. And actually, there aren't any fathers who doesn't want to be involved, but often maybe not asked to be involved in it. So I always tried to kind of alter the date. I would go and see the family for the new birth visit in order for the father to be able to be there. And I think what stands out for me is it actually brings parents together as well, because there's an opportunity to see the baby together and to wonder together about what this little person is telling them. And from what I can hear what you're saying, actually what really matters is understanding baby communication. And I think what's really important is remembering that every baby is an individual. It's a little person. So there isn't a manual out there that will tell you how to look after your baby. You have to write that manual. But Dr. Kevin Newton, who developed the ENBO, always said, but they do come with a manual, but it's reading them. So in order to read the manual, you have to look at your baby, and they will tell you everything that you need to know. And I think reassuring parents with that, and just, you know, inviting both parents to be part of this journey of getting to know their baby, that's what's really important. And I would say it makes a difference. It made my relationship with fathers different. They would actually come to the clinic and see me and tell me about their babies. they would be there at other visits because they actually also had stories to tell that they had experienced with their babies. And it's important for babies to connect with both parents as well. And like you all just said, what lovely relationship you have with your children. And that's that connection. And it's really important for everybody to have those opportunities.
It's not always a lovely relationship with a 21-year-old and a 14-year-old, if I'm honest. But we communicate. That's the main thing, I think. Obviously, I'm joking if my kids are watching. I love you both. So one of the other things that we wanted to tell you about, Inga, if you're interested, is just some of the dads that we've worked with in terms of particularly around baby communication. That's kind of why we're here today. So I wanted to talk about a dad I work with whose partner was on the mother and baby unit. And it was right at the beginning of the first lockdown last year. And he couldn't visit. And when he could visit, he could only go to on the car park. And so he was really worried that he wasn't bonding with his baby at all. And so we did some phone calls and some video calls, and we talked about those kind of remote things that you can do, like making sure that mum's got one of your t-shirts with her so that the smell's there, doing video calls and reading stories over FaceTime, asking mum just to hold the camera up to watch babies, so you can see babies' reactions to you and your voice. Another thing that we talked about was both having the same toy, so that when you're doing these phone calls, you're both feeling and holding the same thing at the same time. And little things like that really helped him to understand that patience with that was the key thing, and that he could build that relationship with those little short windows of time, and that it wasn't forever. And then when mum came home, he started to do all of those things in person with the baby, and it flourished, and he was really pleased. In fact, now he's one of our volunteers, and he supports us with supporting other dads in that position. And it's been, for me, that's been one of the best experiences in this job, is seeing him and his relationship with his daughter just be. He understands now her and who she is, and the fact that she's not the same as his older child, and that they react differently and they don't like the same things, and it's really helped him to be more patient. And I think that communication and patience, it was the key bit. One of the things we use often in Greater Manchester, I'm sure they do across the country, is the watch, wait and wonder, and how just watching your baby and knowing that everything that they do is for a purpose. It's not just a random burp or hiccup or a random arm flail. You know, they do it because they're communicating. I think it's fantastic. I don't know about you and Dan and Lee, if you've got any dads that you can think of that you've done any work with around communication.
Yeah, well, do you remember me talking to you, Kieran, about when I did the EMBO, and then about 2 weeks afterwards, I think I rang you and spoke about Frankie, my little one. So she was like 3 at the time. So obviously a bit older than kind of like normally what we're speaking about EMBO. She just wasn't sleeping. She'd not slept. Like she went from sleeping every night all the way through, which was lovely. Lulled us into a false sense of security. And all of a sudden, she was up for like 3 or 4 hours every night, wouldn't get back to sleep. And the whole this was going on for about a month. And through the whole thing, I was just kind of thinking, all I was thinking in my head was, I've got to get up at this time. You really need to go back to sleep, Frankie. That's all I could think of. So instead of me focusing on comforting her, although I was doing that, it was for me, if you know what I mean, because I need you to go to sleep now because I'll be tired in the morning. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, so I was already tired. And after about a month of doing this every night near enough, I just thought that just watch, wait and wonder just popped into my head. So instead of getting her to trying to get to sleep straight away and then leaving the room to try and get back to sleep for me, I just kind of chilled for a bit in her room with her on the edge of her bed. And then from that, I figured out that she was teething. So one of her teeth was coming through at the back. So just from having that insight to take a step back from and kind of move away from myself, if you know what I mean, and rather than just think about the practical things that I would do to normally get her back to sleep, it just provided a massive insight just to step back and go, all right, okay, wonder what she's thinking. Then I realized, well, she might be in a bit of pain. It looks, might just not be she's grumpy or whatever. so that was ace. But in terms of dads that we work with as well, there's been dads who maybe don't see their children for long periods of time throughout the week. So it's been really, really interesting to speak to them about it, so that when they do see them, how they can have that really, really those really positive interactions with the baby. And sometimes it's quite difficult to speak about over the phone. So it's been really interesting to talk about what their baby's doing. And it's been really rewarding to hear the dads come back to you the week after and go, "Oh, you'll never guess what, Dan. My baby did this. Is it that?" Could be, mate, sounds like it. But it just shows that they're engaging with it and they're taking it on board. There's one dad as well who kind of experienced a bit of trauma just after baby was born. I think he was quite worried about baby, so it was a bit of a barrier to kind of getting involved, if you know what I mean. And he still did it, but he was just quite scared about it. So talking to him about those practical things massively unlocked a door for him, because it just gave him that, it did something different to think about. So he was thinking about, oh, if he's doing this and this and that, and then it just kind of relieved some of that tension and that pressure, and really, really helped him. Over to you, Lee.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things for me is when we've run our antenatal sessions, and we'll go through, baby states. And I think one of the common ones is you just almost see the penny drop in the dad's head, particularly when we talk about the babies being able to process and that ability to be able to turn away. And we put it in layman's terms with dads, which is, look, your baby's not being antisocial, your baby's not bored by what you are saying, is they need that time to process. And they are not doing this to offend you. And you literally just see them go, yeah, I recognise that. And again, we talk about baby states and the the active alert and the drowsy state. And you just see this nod of recognition for those dads that we're supporting that have their infants. And again, it's just nice just to see them, just to make those causal links, those sort of key connections in terms of what is, and you just sort of see the confidence growing in them, which is lovely to see from just a tiny little bit of information, a tiny bit of interpretation.
And one of the things that we've tried to do recently is meet dads with babies, because we can do lots of phone calls and video calls, but actually seeing them with the babies and really pointing out and reinforcing those positive interactions, I think has been a massive boost to our, particularly the dads that we're supporting one-to-one. So we do a walk and talk session, and we have a few dads there and some volunteers. And we had one dad came along, and he had twins in a pram, and he hadn't quite figured out the rain cover. So one rain cover was on the right way around, and one rain cover was on the wrong way around. And it led to a conversation about how one baby was crying because they couldn't see dad. And when we put the rain cover back the other way, the flap came down and the babies could see dad as he was pushing the pram, and he could talk to both of them and interact with both of them. And he realized that actually they were looking for him all the time. So I noticed, and I know one of the Mick, the other coordinator on the walk, noticed that what he was doing was stopping the conversation with us, looking at the babies, patting them on the chest or on the tummy, saying a few quiet words to them, and then coming back to our conversation. He was really bringing them into the conversation. And for me, the positive thing was pointing it out to him and saying, have you seen how they react to you and how they feel calmer once you've done that? And they give you your time to do whatever you need to do. And then you can go back and interact again. It's really rewarding, I think, to be able to see that, that kind of realization that they can communicate really, really early on. I think it's fab, absolutely fab. Have you got any questions for us, Inga, before we move on to something else?
Well, I just think it's really lovely to hear your examples and just how well you are engaging with families and how well they're engaging with you, because that's really important as well. And I really like the way that you are really bringing that listening to the baby and interpretation for families, so they can better understand what their babies are trying to say, what they're communicating, and then thinking together about how you can support the baby and the child with that, as you did also done with your own child, that kind of listening to the baby and taking the time to do it. And it's a busy world that we live in. So there are times when we do have to focus on ourselves. But the fact that you came back and started to think about it, and listened, that's a really good example.
We actually shared a video on social media. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it's had thousands of views. And it's a local dad. I think he's from Bolton with his with his baby, and he's just talking to the baby and stroking the baby's cheek, and the baby's really trying to stick out her tongue, and she does it maybe 2 or 3 times, and eventually she gets a really big tongue sticking out. And then when dad reciprocates that, her face is an absolute picture. She just kind of goes like that. That was what I wanted, and the realization on the baby's face is astounding. And I think sometimes as dads, and I know we talked about it earlier, Dan, we don't always think that babies can communicate with us that early, and it's difficult for us to think about it in those terms. And maybe, and I've heard dads say that they wait for their babies to be able to communicate when the baby's a little bit bigger or a little bit older, or maybe when the baby's crawling or moving around, they can have more of a relationship. But as soon as you point out those little things like sticking the tongue out, or the serve and return, where they're not going to say a word back to you, but they want to fill the gaps and look out for it and wait for it, the practical issues there really help dads to understand that communication. I think that's one of the other things we wanted to talk about was the difference it makes when a dad understands his baby's communicating rather than they're just a baby. And obviously we've just given some examples, but for me, when you speak to a dad and they understand that their baby's communicating with them, it gives them permission to be patient and to wait and to try new things and to not worry about getting it wrong or missing cues, and understanding that we don't need to be perfect. We just need to be good enough and to have that relationship. And they need to understand that babies are communicating with them to be able to be allowed to get it wrong, because otherwise they may not try to communicate with the baby. I know some dads that I've spoken to have said that they're working till 6 maybe, and the baby's going to bed at 6:30, 7 o'clock. So the dads don't really try to have that relationship. It's much easier for mum to settle the baby, so they leave it to mum, and they'll do other jobs in the house like the washing up or hoovering or whatever it is. And actually, when we talk to them about the fact that a 30-minute window in a day is more than enough time for them to bath the baby and enjoy that communication and serve and return and all that reciprocity that we want to talk about, and also that 30-minute window will then help them to be able to settle with their dad. We want the baby to settle with dad as well. We don't want to have to leave it up to mum. And a lot of dads, when they realize that, then become more involved in supporting baby in those processes, like bedtime or whatever it might be, consoling. It's just, I think it's fascinating to watch dad's realization when that happens. How do you think? I mean, we've talked about a lot of the dads that we work with, but we work with dozens. In our universal work, I think this is the big thing that we do a little bit differently to other organisations that maybe are supporting dads in this way. We speak to dads universally before babies are here about their babies. And some of the things that we ask are like, what football team will they support? What hobbies are you looking forward to sharing with them? Really helping to keep baby in mind. And I think that's another part of how we support dads to then engage in that relationship going forward. What do you think about, Inga, about how dads feel antenatally about their relationship with the baby? How do you think that develops from an antenatal point?
That's actually something I would have loved to ask you guys about.
Well, we can talk about that all day. So
yeah, because actually one of my burning questions to you as fathers and working with fathers is, what would your message be to professionals? How do we better engage with fathers? How do we do that? I mean, I'm in a profession that's predominantly women, and so it's really helpful. And I do remember when you came to the MBO training and you just made a few points about actually working with fathers. There's something that you can be aware of and like engaging. And I think that's something that would be very, very valuable. regarding engaging with fathers, we just need to involve them more, and they need to be equal to mothers. That's something that's really important, and that's something that's probably going to take a long time in order with leave and all those kind of things as well. But it's something that we can work towards. But they need to be involved. They are a parent. So for me, it's about inviting them to all the developmental reviews and appointments and everything else. And it shouldn't just be the mother's name that's on records, it should be father's as well. So that's a really good starting point to involve. But I'm really interested in your thoughts because you're in it and you actually have a lot more experience in working with fathers than I have, because mine has been so fleeting. And I would love to learn more. And also in our training that we can actually share with all the the trainees that we have. We're always saying engage with fathers, but how do we do that best?
We actually co-deliver training with the Institute of Health Visiting now on their fathers mental health PIMS champions course, and that's been really eye-opening for me in terms of how professionals, everybody wants to work with dads, but what we find is that services around families are mum oriented, and sometimes that's completely justified, but actually what they then want to do is bring the dads into the service that mums are accessing, and it's not always comfortable for men to access the same services, and so sometimes there needs to be a change, and I think that's what we've done in Greater Manchester. I think the main reason that we've managed to do it so well is that we are coming at dads from a parent-infant mental health perspective and not perinatal mental health in its own right, and although they are entwined in the work that we do, thinking about it from baby's perspective and having baby in the center of the work that we do really helps us to engage not only with the families but also with the services around the families. I think that's a key point. I don't know about you, Lee and Dan, if you've got any other pointers about engaging dads. We have those hints and tips and things, don't we, that we talk about often.
Yeah, I think you and it's language is crucial, and I think one of yeah, I know Kieran, particularly in the Northwest, there's been some really good work done about the more inclusive language, particularly from the professionals in terms of assessment and just encouraging, dads to understand that health professionals are there to support, mum, baby and them, but also probably opening up to the professionals that they were also there to support dads as well as mum and baby in that appropriate way. I think one of my frustrations is funnily enough, is as an organisation, we will, sometimes encounter with professionals, so with people that have a high degree of knowledge and competency and experience, that will sometimes ask a very simple question, which is, well, why is it dad matters? Why is it not same-sex couples matter or single parents are to matter? And all of those are true and valid. And as I say, we're talking about the second largest cohort that supports infants and newborns. That they are dads. It's indisputable. After mums, it's dads. And we kind of need to kind of just be comfortable as a society that males play a pivotal role. Not all males are threatening. Not all, males represent that sort of, that sort of potential predatory sort of figure in that. And we kind of need to guard, I think, against, unconscious bias. I think there's lots of examples I can think of. And I think even just some of the things where, we've seen conference, and Kieran and I have spoken about it, where we talked about conferences where, dads or discussion about dads is lumped next to a presentation on safeguarding. And it's that unconscious narrative that sometimes I think is just running in the background. So anything that is more inclusive, anything that kind of puts dads, as we mentioned, on that equal footing, I think is a really, really positive thing.
I think just following on from that, I've had a bit of a Twitter discussion recently about the terms that we use to address parents, and we always say mum in every service, unless there's a specific reason for them not to be called mum. But then we lump that with partners, or we use women and families. But actually, dads don't feel that mum and partner is addressing their parental status. It feels like they're playing a support role and not a central role in parenting. And the term women and families also when I think about that, that isn't me, that's my partner and kids, and I'm there to support them, but I'm not part of that family's bit of the label. And I think what we need to do is use more terms and more terminology to be more inclusive rather than try to be more generic, because the more generic you are, the more likely it is that the smaller groups or the more disenfranchised groups will feel more disenfranchised. So for instance, we always try and use mum and dad. If we know them particularly, we'll use the phrases that they feel happy with. But also, rather than using partner, we would use co-parent or intended parent, because the parental term is the important one. That's the motivating factor for them to feel supported. So yeah, it's kind of a key thing is to think about not trying to be more generic to be more inclusive, try and be more specific around who it is you're engaging with. Yeah. What about you, Dan? Have you got any kind of ideas about how we can support professionals?
Yeah, I'd agree with you both. I think that, not to sound grumpy or anything, but I think systemically throughout the years, it has been focused on mum and baby, and that's all right. But now, I suppose to get what Lee to say, like going from what Lee said as well, like that thing of, you know, hunter-gatherer type thing doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. You know, I don't need to be that, you know, that strong man with a big club to defend against like polar bears or grizzly bears or whatever that are gonna, you know, I don't have to go out and hunt food. Doesn't serve a purpose anymore. So now that we can kind of start to move away from that idea of what that historical stereotypical idea of what a man should be and what a dad should be, it's a great time to do it. Will it be slow? Yeah, most probably. Same with any kind of change. Yeah, it'll be slow. But I think, like in terms of including people on an equal footing, definitely 100%. I 100% believe the best thing I could do when our health visitor turned up was say, can I make anyone a cup of tea? That was what I thought that was my best input I could have. Whereas in retrospect, now I know that I should have been listening and doing everything that mum was doing. And I think letting dads know that, because that's what we kind of get across in our new dad groups, and I suppose any other work that we do. But professionals saying to dad, rather than maybe just kind of mentioning, oh, do you want to come and, you know, do you want to see what we're doing? Or it might be just a bit, not a bit more forceful, but just pass a bit more knowledge on in terms of, well, this is for both of you to help understand your baby, or, you know, so I think dads, you know, we do kind of, if there's a chance to shy away, we do. But I think that's because how it's always been, hasn't it? It's how it's been set up to be. Yeah, if that made any sense.
I was going to say,
Totally.
yeah, because the other thing, which is what we know, is it misses out that thing that actually dads will often put mum and baby first. They will put them front and centre and will rigidly take a step back. And actually what we need is knowledgeable, caring, considerate professionals that will just coax the dad into the foreground as well at the same time, you know, so that you know, it's still recognised that, you know, dads will need that cold morning start to kind of become engaged and involved, but instead of orbiting on the periphery, you kind of bring them front and center. It's, you know, to have somebody that does that, and there are some brilliant professionals out there that do that, you know, in no way, shape or form we say that all, you know, but it's something that a lot of the feedback from dads is that, you know, it's just bring us into the fore and bring us into that sphere, and it's amazing what response you will get on an individual level, but probably on a societal level as well.
I
find it really interesting. You know, the video, Kieran, that we used in the health visitor training at Bolton, that's in all our training that we do.
Which video?
The one that was talking to dads. So there was like a few different dads. It was in the living rooms and they were just speaking to them.
Yeah, on our YouTube channel.
So going from what Lee said, all literally, because it took me aback, because we're listening to it, and every single dad that was spoken to on that video, whatever they were concerned about, whether it was their own mental health, finances, have I got enough space, when you actually spoke to them about it, it was never a concern for themselves. So it was never, I wonder if I wonder if finances will be okay, so that, you know, we can still go to that restaurant once a month, and you know, I'll be able to still play golf or whatever it is. It was always, oh, I hope we've got enough for mum and baby. because we need to look after him. I hope it's, and everything on that video, literally everything went back to, because I hope mum and baby will be okay. And that's the biggest worry, isn't it? And I think if we can, something that's really helpful is saying that, what I found helpful to Dad's talking to him is that you've been involved in that stuff. You know mum best. You know mum best, and you know baby best as well. So being involved in that is the biggest support you can be. As much as, you know, we all love a good cup of tea. We can do better things than making brews, can't we? I don't make a good brew anyway, so I'm a bit useless at making brews. So I'm definitely better with the parenting stuff.
I think there's a couple of other practical things that we talk about in the training that we deliver to professionals as well. Things like using facts and data and sciencey things. Men really engage with that tangible, practical stuff, and that's why I think when we point out practical things from the EMBO, dads really engage with that and try and do it more often. Also, don't be subtle. We always use the example of if there's a couple and the woman walks in the living room and says the pots need washing, the dad in his mind really isn't thinking that that's a request to wash the pots. He's thinking that he's going to agree with that statement because they probably do need washing, but then he's not going to go and wash them, and that can cause kind of conflict. And that was definitely my experience. But the subtlety and the kind of trying to make a hint to things doesn't work for men. We're very much in the moment. And if you point out and you're very direct, we will engage with it. And it's the same as asking questions. If you're concerned about a dad, you can ask them a question about what you're concerned about. Don't fluff around the edges, just ask them directly and outright. You can't make their situation worse by asking them how they're doing. You might want to avoid using the word, how are you feeling? But you can say, how is that affecting you? Or what are you thinking about? Or how are you doing with that? Really practical questions that lead to the same answers can really help men. I think the last thing that I wanted to do, Inga, was to ask you, because obviously we want to keep the baby at the center of everything. So I wanted to ask you what difference it makes to the baby to have a dad that is attuned to them and their cues and is responsive.
Well, it's about the baby and that parent, actually, because for the baby to have two parents or lots of people around them who understand what they're trying to say, so what they communicate through the behavior, as you've just talked about, and for that baby to have a father who understands those communication cues, so is able to sort of think and wonder. You use that term quite a bit, which I like. So wonder about what are you trying to tell me? Now, to have a father who's able to do that is much nicer than having that baby's going to feel safe and secure and met and understood, pretty much like adults do, actually. So, and that long term will lead to a better relationship, better learning, improved outcomes in development. Long term, if a baby is understood and their needs are met, and in order to meet their needs, you do have to understand what they're trying to tell you. Otherwise, we can get it wrong so many times. And it's something any parent and myself, you do things and you keep thinking, oh, I just don't know what to do anymore. But if you keep going, the baby will tell you. And if you can do that, and that baby has a sense and they have parents who can do that, they are going to be more calm. They will also, because your responses are going to be more predictable as well, because you will go, so that's what you need, and you will do that again the next time with a few differences perhaps. Babies learn from all those experiences, and that's really important. And I mean, one of the things that I've really been thinking about is what aspects of the embo do you think is most useful? Because I'm sort of wondering around crying. And Lee, you just said, you know, how quick your baby responded to your voice. And that's something that I really wish all fathers knew. If you just talk and sing and touch and get to know your baby even before they're born, they do recognize you. They will respond to you and they will calm.
I'm a totally fully paid up member of that particular fan club as a result. And I was gobsmacked. I was genuinely, I thought, it was instinctive. It wasn't as if I'm going to take over from the midwives. It was just, I just felt compelled that actually I'm going to do something to soothe my baby. He's just been born. It's been 41 hours out of the womb, coming out of the womb. And it was instantaneous. In the same way as Kieran and Dad said about the video with the baby sticking the tongue out and the father responding to the baby. It was that instantaneous recognition. And it was that connection, and it was such a special moment. I will treasure that till the day I die. But to me, it just crystallized that thing that the relationship is already established. And it's something that, I hoped, because it was a concept, I suppose for, because we're very focused upon mums, and mums can feel baby and dads can vicariously feel baby if they place their hands or place their ear and things like that. But I think there's always that element where you feel secondary, because there is that special nurturing relationship that mum has where she's carried it within. I think just bearing witness to the fact that dads can still have that special relationship even before the baby is born, and you might not physically see the outcome of it then, but you will most definitely experience it at a point after the baby's gone through birth. So yeah, absolutely.
I think it's important as well that we always recognize that the baby recognizing you, the baby communicating with you, will affect them forever. It's building the blueprint to their brain. It's giving them the resilience that they're going to need, the mechanisms to cope with how life is, all because you sang to your baby when they arrived, And I think that for me is, now that my kids are older, I see that now in my kids and the relationships that I have with them. And I think what dads need is a motivator. And if we know that with that doing that for our babies will result in better chances in school and less likely to commit crime and better physical health and all of those things that it's going to affect, then they're more likely to try and do more of it. Yeah.
I've got to show, because as we were talking, it took me back to that moment. And I remembered seeing this. I've gone to my iPhone, other phones are available. And on my list of the 25 most played songs in my playlist, because I love my music, you might not necessarily be able to see it. I'll turn my background off if I can do. But there, sort of in front of me, I'll put it sort of there. The number top 2-3 things are themes. I think the theme soundtrack to Avengers, AC/DC, and number 2 is In the Night Garden. Because I used to do that. I used to sing all the time to Thomas and Matthew when they were sort of younger, to the extent that even now I'm just thinking, out of all the songs that I've played in the years since, and Thomas will be 10 and all that, I'm thinking that must have been a heck of a lot of singing in the meantime, because that is still number 2 in my long-term playlist on my phone. So wow.
You look a bit like Eggle Pickle as well, to be fair, mate. You've got
yeah,
that.
To be fair, it's Macapaka today, mate.
Let's not let Lee be the DJ at any of our works parties. So Dan, what about when we're doing our antenatal groups, particularly the new dad groups? We talk about aspects of the embo. Which ones do you think go down? I could tell you the statistics from the feedback, but what when you're delivering it, which ones do you think you get the most response from?
There's a slide where we talk about some really useful stuff about attachment and bonding, and I think all of it's based on the embo. Serve and return, quality time, and I think that you said before that when dads acknowledge that it only takes 30 minutes a day, that's like okay. Dads kind of go, really? Like, and when you explain to them, it doesn't have to be you, because some dads as well feel awkward about talking to babies and things like that, because sometimes it doesn't come natural. So I think dads knowing that it can be doing something with your baby as well. It can be bath time. When you say to dads, like, because I love bath time, I think the kids love it, we have a laugh, it's great. And when you explain that to dads, that that's like a bit of golden time, all right. It's not kind of, we don't just have to like have a conversation, you know, like sometimes when you say conversation with baby, they might think like, I have to sit and talk to my baby. That's, and something we say to dads as well, don't we, that it might be difficult to think of what to say, especially when baby's in mum's tummy. We kind of say that as long as it's your voice, doesn't matter. You read an IKEA instruction booklet. As long as it's your voice, and you're talking, or if you're singing, or as uncomfortable as it may be to sing in that high-pitched voice that we can't help but do when there's a baby in the room, that's a bit awkward when baby's still in mum's tummy. Just do it, because baby don't care. Just do it. And then once you've had a bit of a laugh about it, dad's kind of go, oh, okay. And hopefully, I think they respond quite well to that. They always respond well to baby states, especially the active alert videos, the active alert videos that we show as well. They absolutely love that, and it just kind of highlights as well that how much communication can happen between you and your baby, and that really hits home, I think, with dads.
I think I found that the consoling kind of process, if you like, really goes down well, because it feels like they're walking away from the group with a tool to go away and to try and to use, and they can see which bits of it work and which particular consoling method is best for their baby, and we tie that into them communicating with the baby and getting to know them and learning about them. But that always comes back on the feedback as consoling and the baby states are the most interesting bits for the dads. And also being able to talk to them about active alert and how babies turn away from you when they need a rest, and understanding sleep and why it's important for babies, and the different kinds of sleep and what you'll notice while they're asleep. And one of the one last example just to share with you, Inga, that I'm sure you'd be interested in. We've had a couple of dads who've been having supervised contact with babies, where they'll be seeing them for a couple of hours in a contact centre, and honestly, those dads are so frustrated if baby's asleep, because they can't display or demonstrate how good a dad they are in that 2 hours, and it feels like that's what they need to do. When we talk to them about baby states and about sleep and about how important it is, and about actually when you're holding your baby asleep for those 2 hours, all of the things that that's doing for them, it completely changes the game for them, and they feel present with the baby even though the baby's asleep. And I think that for me is one of the best outcomes we've had this year, has been those dads who've said contact goes far better now that I know that if baby's asleep, I can hold them, I can watch them, I can interact with what they're doing, because I'll know if they're in a deep sleep or if they're in a light sleep. And it's fascinating. And we also have one dad who said he was doing the night feeds and his baby would wake up and would be crying, and he felt really lonely at that time. And when we talked about how babies interact with us, even when they're drowsy or they're feeding or whatever it is, he realized that suddenly he had a whole hour in the middle of the night, just him and his son, and he could interact and build a relationship in that time. And it became his favorite part of the day, even though he was tired and he was frustrated. He was looking forward to it. And I think knowing the communication that happens and your baby's there to communicate with you all the time is a key component in what we're trying to do at Dad Matters. I think we've covered everything. Is there anything anybody else wants to add before we wrap it up?
I think it was just the only thing was the information that we give out both through Brazelton and Dad Matters and all that kind of, there's a real, because again, it was that thing that we wish we'd known about it. And I think there's mediums and forums like social media now that can be brilliantly used to kind of get these messages out to dads. But it's interesting even in this forum because, we talk about skin to skin, and, I think Jake Quickenden had put a post on social media with his newborn, and he was doing skin to skin, and the amount of abuse that he got from, people saying, well, why are you showing your muscles off? And just this complete misinterpretation about what was taking place. in one sense, it showed here's the progress, here is somebody that's actively involved in doing it, but here is a majority of people that really don't understand why what he's doing is important and the impact that can have. So I think, you know, the more information and the mediums and forms that can kind of get the message out there, I think it's a really, really, really positive thing.
Yeah, well, you're doing some amazing work, and it's just really, really great to hear about it. And what I'm hearing all the time is just how important it is to understand how your baby communicates and be with them and listen to them. And actually, that it really matters. It really matters, even if it is just half an hour that you've got spare, then it really is very powerful.
Thank you for joining us, Inga. Thanks, Dan and Lee, for your inputs today, and have a lovely rest of Father's Day. Don't forget, tomorrow is International Father's Mental Health Day, so check out social media with the hashtag IFMD or whatever it is, and we'll catch you on social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you.